All right, so this year's L. Smith dinner, huh? You know that whole, like, playful roast they do for the presidential candidates? Yeah, well, this year was something else.
Yeah, it's usually a fun tradition, right? But this
Yeah,
time it felt different, like really reflected all the tension and division of this election.
totally. Okay, so for anyone who maybe missed it, the Al Smith dinner, it's this big fancy New York City fundraiser, been around for ages, almost 80 years, benefits Catholic charities, all that.
Hmm.
And the whole thing is known for these lighthearted roasts between the candidates.
Right.
But this year, it was less lighthearted and a lot more intense. Like, take Vice President Harris. She actually skipped the whole thing, chose to campaign in Wisconsin instead, sent a pre-recorded message.
Which is a first, in recent memory at least, never had a candidate or running mate completely skip out on the dinner.
And, of course, you know, Trump, he picked up on that right away.
Yeah.
His speech was, well, classic Trump.
Yeah.
He went after everyone, Governor Walz, Senator Schumer.
Right, right.
You know, Walz from Minnesota, Schumer from New York. They've taken some pretty strong stances on transgender rights. Haven't really gone over well with a lot of conservatives.
Yeah. Right, right. Definitely a point of contention there.
And of course, VP Harris, even though she wasn't there in person, she wasn't safe either.
No, no, he definitely had some words for her. And I mean, some of his comments about her were, I don't know, they felt more personal this time, less playful than usual, questioning her intelligence, bringing up her husband's past, even, that whole mispronouncing her name thing.
Yeah, it was a different tone, for sure. Not exactly your typical lighthearted jabs. He did try to make a self-deprecating joke at one point.
Oh,
He
yeah.
literally just said, like, nope, I've got nothing. I've got nothing. There's nothing to say.
Oh, boy.
It did not land at all.
You know, that awkward silence after he said that spoke volumes? I
Yeah.
mean, the whole point of this dinner is usually for these politicians to be a little self-deprecating, show some vulnerability, and that just wasn't there this time, which made the whole thing feel really off.
Like, he knew he should tell a self-deprecating joke at that point,
Right.
but couldn't actually bring himself to do it.
Yeah, like he was going through the motions.
And then he starts talking about how the last time a Republican showed up to this thing solo was Reagan back at 84. And he's like, oh, yeah, and Reagan won in a landslide. But it's like, hello, you were here in 2016 with Hillary Clinton.
Right, he wasn't exactly flying solo then.
And that dinner, I mean, talk about tense. That was a whole other level.
It's true. It's important to remember how that looked. Trump, right there, seated next to Hillary Clinton. They exchanged some pretty pointed barbs that night, too. It wasn't exactly friendly.
No, not at all. And then, to top it all off, he decides to, like, publicly align himself with Mayor Eric Adams.
Oh,
Mayor
yeah.
Adams, who's recently indicted.
Right, right.
And Trump's up there implying they're both victims of some political witch hunt, which, I mean,
Interesting choice.
interesting is one word for it.
So we've got Trump coming in swinging, ready to pick a fight, and then you've got Harris who decides to sit this one out entirely.
Yeah, it was a bold move. And I mean, you got to think, it could have been a lose-lose for her showing up.
Oh, totally. Like, what do you even do? Try to joke along with him and risk getting caught off guard? Or go the other way and come off as stiff and humorless?
Exactly. So skipping the dinner, smart move. She avoids any chance of an awkward interaction, doesn't get pulled into his whole, Trump being Trump thing.
Right.
And instead,
She's on the campaign trail, focusing on those key states, delivering her own message, all very calculated.
oh, absolutely. The Harris campaign was playing chess while it seemed like, well,
Right.
they knew exactly what they were doing. By focusing on those states and putting out that video message, they controlled the narrative, targeted their voters.
And speaking of that video message, talk about a 180 from Trump's speech.
Night and day, totally different vibe. Hers was all about faith, unity, hope for the future. A stark contrast to all the, let's just say it, negativity from earlier.
Yeah.
And, they still managed to slip in some humor, bringing back Molly Shannon as Mary Catherine Gallagher. Genius.
Pure genius, right. Total nostalgia play, and they worked in a little dig at Trump while they were at it.
That would be like criticizing Detroit and Detroit line. So good.
Right. The audience ate it up, and it kind of subtly highlighted the difference between their whole approaches,
Yeah, way to make a point without, actually having to be in the room. And he really did say that, by the way, compared Detroit to a developing nation at one of his rallies.
It's just, the whole thing really puts it in perspective. Both campaigns, they're walking this tightrope, right? Trying to figure out, how do we come off as relatable, authentic, all while landing our message? And what role does humor even play in all of that?
It's a tough one. You go too heavy on the jokes, people think you're not taking things seriously. But if you're too serious, you seem stiff, out of touch.
Exactly. And the Al Smith dinner, it's always been this weird space, right? Like, it's supposed to be where these candidates can show a little bit of their human side, connect with voters on a personal level.
Which is kind of what made this year so, I don't know, unsettling. The stakes are so high, everyone's already on edge. Feels like all the old rules are out the window.
Yeah, it's like everyone knew this wasn't just some dinner, some roast. This was a strategic battle, a chance to really drive home their image and take a jab at the opponent.
And that begs the question, does that strategy actually work on voters? I mean, in the long run.
That is the million-dollar question. And it's what makes this whole event, all the speeches, the reactions, so fascinating to unpack. It wasn't about the jokes or the awkward silences. It was a glimpse into where we are, what political discourse has become. How do we even find common ground when it feels like everything is pushing us further apart?
So we've talked about the speeches, the strategies, even how people reacted, but like, what does all of this actually tell us about American politics right now? I mean,
It's like this magnifying glass, right, on this thing we're all dealing with. That line between humor and just being offensive. Think about it. This dinner, it used to be all about those playful jabs. A chance to see these big-time politicians make fun of themselves, make fun of each other, all in good fun. But this year, it felt less like a roast and more like just another fight, in an election that already feels like it's got way too many of those.
yeah, it makes you wonder if we've just forgotten how to laugh together, especially when it comes to something as serious, as divisive as politics.
It's a good question, and honestly, I don't know if there's an easy answer. Some people, they'd say that with everything so divided these days, humor is more important now than ever. Like, it's that bridge we need, right? Helps us find some common ground, reminds us we're all human here. But then there are others who'd say that in this crazy, hyper-partisan world we're living in, any kind of joke, any attempt at humor is just going to backfire, get twisted around, used as a weapon, and honestly, it probably just pushed us even further apart.
And that's what makes digging into this whole thing so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're not here to give you the answers. We don't have them all figured out.
Yeah.
But what we have done, I think, is lay things out there, the details, the context,
Yeah.
giving you the rundown so you can make up your own mind.
Exactly. We've given you the lay of the land. Now it's up to you to decide what you make of it.
Right. And hey, maybe this even sparks some interesting conversations at your own dinner table.
There you go. Nothing wrong with a little food for thought. Yeah.
Nothing at all.
Mm.
So, as we head into these last few weeks before the election, we'll leave you with this. In a world where it feels like everything these candidates do, every word they say, even every tweet they send, is so carefully planned out, so calculated, is there still room for something genuine? Can an event like the Al Smith dinner still be that moment of connection? Or is it just destined to become, another casualty in all of this, just something else that gets pulled apart in this increasingly polarized world? Something
Yeah.
to think about, right?
Big time.
And until next time, keep asking those questions, keep digging deeper, and whatever you do, keep the conversation going.